I'll never forget the day my friend Richard called me, 3 years into his retirement. His voice was shaking. "I made a terrible mistake," he said. "I thought I had it all figured out." Richard had been a successful accountant for 35 years. He did everything by the book, saved diligently, consulted financial advisors. And yet, he made a mistake that's costing him his peace of mind every single day. And here's the thing that broke my heart. It was completely avoidable. Today, I'm going to share the 5 biggest retirement mistakes that people over 50 are still making. And I'm not talking about the obvious ones everyone mentions. I'm talking about the mistakes that financial advisors don't always warn you about. The ones that affect not just your wallet, but your happiness, your relationships, and your entire quality of life. Stick with me until the end, because mistake number 5, it's the one that surprised me the most, and it might be the most important one of all. Let me tell you about Margaret. Margaret worked as a teacher for 40 years. She loved her students, but by year 39, she was exhausted. She counted down the days to retirement like a prisoner marking time on a cell wall. Finally, the day came. Gold watch, tearful goodbye, the whole ceremony. 6 months later, I ran into her at the grocery store, and I barely recognized her. Not physically, but something in her eyes had changed. "How's retirement?" I asked, expecting her to gush about freedom and relaxation. She paused, looked around like she was about to share a secret, and whispered, "I'm so bored I could scream." This is mistake number 1, retiring from something instead of retiring to something. Most people spend decades dreaming about what they're escaping. The alarm clock, the commute, the difficult boss. But they spend almost no time planning what they're retiring to. Here's what happens. You wake up that first Monday of retirement feeling amazing, no alarm, freedom. By week 2, you've binge-watched 3 series. By month 2, you've reorganized every closet twice. By month 6, you're asking yourself, is this it? Is this what I worked 40 years for? The fix is simple but crucial. Before you retire, create a vision board, not of beaches and golf courses, but of purpose. What will give your days meaning? Volunteering? Learning Italian? Starting that woodworking hobby? Building deeper friendships? Richard, my friend from the opening. This was part of his mistake. He retired to nothing but golf and Netflix. His identity was his career, and when that ended, he felt lost. Don't retire from your job. Retire to your next chapter. Big difference. Mistake number 2 is one that catches people completely off guard, underestimating healthcare costs in retirement. Now, I know what you're thinking. I've heard this one before, but hear me out, because there's a twist most people miss. My neighbor Tom retired at 62. He had a decent nest egg. He'd done the calculations. He even had a spreadsheet. He factored in Medicare. He felt prepared. What he did not factor in was the 3-year gap before. Medicare kicked in at 65. Private insurance cost him $1,400 a month. That's almost $17,000 a year he hadn't really planned for. But here's the bigger issue, even with Medicare. The average couple retiring today will spend over $300,000 on healthcare throughout retirement. That's not a typo. $300,000. And that doesn't include long-term care. If you or your spouse needs assisted living or nursing care, we're talking $7,000 to $10,000 per month in many areas. Tom's wife developed Parkinson's at 68. The specialized care she needed wasn't fully covered. Within 4 years, they'd burned through savings they thought would last 20 years. Here's what you need to do. Get brutally realistic about healthcare planning. First, if you're retiring before 60, calculate the real cost of private insurance or COBRA. It's shocking. Second, look into long-term care insurance in your 50s, not your 60s. It's exponentially cheaper when you're younger and healthier. Third, build a healthcare reserve fund separate from your retirement savings. I recommend at least $50,000 to $100,000 that you don't touch unless it's medical. I know these numbers are scary, but you know what's scarier? Being 75 and having to choose between your medication and your mortgage? Alright, mistake number 3, taking Social Security too early. But wait, you're saying, I've earned it. Why shouldn't I take it as soon as I can at 62? Let me tell you about my own mistake with this one. My father retired at 62 and immediately started collecting Social Security. He figured, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? What if I die before 70? Here's what happened. By taking it at 62, instead of waiting until his full retirement age of 66, his benefit was reduced by 25% forever. Not temporarily, forever. If he'd waited until 70, his benefit would have been 32% higher than at 66, and 76% higher than what he actually gets at 62. My dad is now 78 and healthy. He's looking at potentially 15 to 20 more years of reduced income because of a decision he made in a moment of impatience. Now, I understand the counter-argument. What if I don't live that long? Here's the truth. If you're healthy and you have longevity in your family, the math almost always favors waiting. The break-even point is usually around age 78 to 80. If you live past that, you win big. The fix. If you can afford to wait, even just to your full retirement age, do it. Use other savings to bridge the gap. If you're married, consider having the higher earner wait until 70 while the lower earner takes it earlier. This maximizes the survivor benefit. And please talk to a Social Security specialist, not just a general financial advisor. This decision is too important to guess at. Mistake number 4 might seem counterintuitive. Spending more in retirement than you did while working. How is that even possible, you ask? I thought retirement was supposed to be cheaper. Meet Susan and Dave. They retired with a solid $800,000 nest egg. They'd always been frugal. Brown bag lunches, staycations, they were ready. Then retirement hit. Suddenly, they had time. Time to take that Alaskan cruise they'd always dreamed about. Time to visit the grandkids across the country every month instead of twice a year. Time to eat out instead of rushing through a homemade dinner before the evening commute. Dave took up golf. Those club fees. $300 a month, plus equipment, plus the post-game lunches with his new golf buddies. Susan joined a gym, started yoga classes, signed up for painting workshops. All wonderful things, all enriching experiences. But here's what happened. Their spending in the first 3 years of retirement was 40%, higher than their spending in their last 3 working years. This is incredibly common. Financial planners call it the retirement honeymoon phase. You're finally free. You want to do all the things you put off for 40 years, and you do them all at once. The problem? Your income just dropped by 50 to 70%, but your spending increased. Susan and Dave burned through $150,000 in 3 years. At that rate, their $800,000 would be gone in 16 years. They're both only 64. Here's the thing, I'm not saying don't enjoy retirement. That's the whole point. But you need a realistic retirement budget that includes fun, travel, and hobbies. Without going overboard in the early years, the Fix plan for 3 phases of retirement spending. Phase 1, from 60 to 70, the active years. You'll spend more on travel and activities. Budget accordingly. Phase 2, from 70 to 80, the transition years. Spending typically decreases as you slow down naturally. Phase 3, 80 and beyond. The healthcare years, spending may increase again, but for medical rather than recreational reasons. Don't blow your entire budget in Phase 1. Pace yourself. Your 75-year-old self will thank you. And now we come to mistake number 5. This is the one that surprised me. The one that's not about money at all. Mistake number 5. Assuming your relationships will automatically thrive in retirement. Remember Richard from the beginning, the friend who called me, voice shaking, saying he'd made a terrible mistake? This was his real mistake. Not finances, not planning, but this. He retired, but his wife Susan kept working for 3 more years. He thought those 3 years would be fine. He'd have time to golf, to putter around the house, to finally relax. But something happened he didn't expect. They fell out of rhythm. For 35 years, they'd had the same schedule, same routines. They were a team. Then suddenly, Richard was home all day while Susan was still working. He wanted to have lunch together. She was in back-to-back meetings. He wanted to travel on random Wednesdays. She had projects due. When Susan finally retired, Richard thought things would click back into place. But by then, they'd grown apart. Different friend groups, different hobbies, different daily rhythms. Richard told me, with tears in his eyes, I retired to spend more time with my wife. Now we barely speak. This happens more often than anyone talks about. Retirement can be the biggest stress test a marriage ever faces. You go from seeing each other a few hours a day to 24/7s. All those little annoyances, they're magnified. That hobby your spouse has that used to be cute, when you're hearing it for 8 hours a day, it's maddening. But it's not just marriages. Friendships suffer too. If all your friends were work friends, what happens when you retire and they're still working? The fix. First, if you're married or partnered, try to retire together if possible, or at least within a year of each other. Second, have the conversation before you retire. What does each of you envision? How much togetherness versus independence? What are your individual and shared goals? Third, invest in relationships intentionally. Join clubs, volunteer, take classes. Don't assume friendships will magically appear. And fourth, give each other space. Just because you're both retired doesn't mean you need to do everything together. Healthy relationships need breathing room. I watched my own parents navigate this beautifully. My mom retired 2 years before my dad. When dad finally retired, they sat down and created his days, her days, and our days. On his days, dad did his photography hobby without mom hovering. On her days, mom met with her book club without feeling guilty. On our days, they traveled, gardened together, or just enjoyed each other's company. They've been happily retired together for 12 years now. Richard and Susan, they eventually went to counseling. They're doing better now. But Richard told me, I wish we'd had these conversations before I retired. We could have avoided so much pain. So there you have it. The 5 biggest retirement mistakes people over 50 are still making. Retiring to nothing instead of to something. Underestimating healthcare costs, taking Social Security too early, lifestyle inflation in the early years, and neglecting the relationships that matter most. Here's the beautiful thing. Every single one of these is avoidable. You have the power to make different choices. Retirement can be the best chapter of your life, but only if you plan not just financially, but emotionally, socially, and purposefully. If this video helped you, do me a favor, share it with someone who's thinking about retirement. These conversations matter. And drop a comment below. Which of these mistakes surprised you most? Or better yet, what retirement mistake did you make that you wish you could warn others about? I read every comment, and your wisdom might help someone else avoid a painful mistake. Until next time, remember, retirement isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. Make it a great one.